Hello, everyone. I see folks are joining us. Welcome to the State of Design Tokens 2024. I'm going to give folks a couple of minutes to kind of tune in and get logged into the Zoom. But in the meantime, if you want to say hi, please share your name and where you're from in the chat. If you are using the chat, though, please make sure to change the to from host and panelists to everyone so that everyone can see who you are and where you're coming from.
I always love seeing how far across the world everyone is in these things. It's kind of crazy just like how distributed things are now.
It really is. It's like the best thing about having like a virtual event, because like Kai is from South Africa. And then
I almost ate my words there, though, considering the two that came out first were from the Bay Area. And I was just,
I mean, yeah, we're gonna
thank
skip
you,
over
Kai, for
those
saving me.
and jump into the rest. New York, Wales, SoCal,
North Carolina.
yeah, North Bay, Turkey, India, Boston.
Oh, I know Amy Osborne.
I really want like an interactive one of
Germany.
these where we just see like on a map countries highlighting.
That'd
I
be
think
so
I've seen that
fun.
in another conference. They have like the pins they throw onto like a.
I
like
think
a
Into
Figma.
Design Systems does something really fun on
That's
Fig
dope.
Jam.
I'm into that.
Denver,
Very into that.
Portland, Oregon.
Oh, a
Lots
little
of Germany.
Portlander.
Germany.
What's up, Natalie? I'm calling in from Portland right now.
We love the West Coast. Spain.
Ranjit from India.
Yeah.
Spain.
Another
I'd rather be on the
Portland.
West Coast of Spain,
Portland.
to be
Portland
honest.
coming in strong
Oh,
here.
Spain.
Oh, the representation.
More Boston. Oh, Alex. Aha.
Another India. Pittsburgh.
Turkey. Yes.
Miami.
Hey.
Belgium.
Georgia.
Is that Georgia the
Bosnia.
state or Georgia the country?
Herzegovina.
Yeah, that is an ambiguous
Then-
one.
Toronto.
The country.
Okay. Country.
Oh, country. Nice.
Love it.
Alex's soul lives in Hobbiton. Alex, are you going to be moving to New Zealand anytime soon, or is that just the hope? I want to move to New Zealand. It's so beautiful.
It looks so beautiful. Just my
Just
hopes.
my hopes.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, we're hoping for you too.
yeah, I got faith in you.
Lord of the Rings. Someone's coming over to Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So I will say New Zealand is a hell of a flight from Germany. I think it's like 26 hours.
Recruiting. Oh yeah, I think I've heard about that, of getting tech folks to move to New Zealand. I think they had like a specific visa or program.
Yeah, the startup visa.
Interesting. They did that for Portugal, I think, a couple of years ago.
Love
Thank
it.
you,
Well, shall we
Dan.
jump into some intros here?
Yes, let's
Cool.
do it. Thank you all so much for joining. Welcome to our discussion to deep dive into the results of the State of Design Tokens for 2024. I'm Jocelyn. I'm the head of community at Supernova. And if you don't know, Supernova is a design system platform that connects your design and engineering data so you can create, manage, document, and automate design tokens and other things in one place. Before we jump into the panel and introductions, a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is recorded right now and will be shared with folks who registered via email later this week. We'll also share on social and in our community. You can also enable automated captions if you'd like. And as you all are doing right now, you can chime in with your opinions in the chat. So just make sure you've changed it to everyone instead of hosts and panelists so that everyone can see your message and hear your opinions. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function, or else we might miss it in the chat, and we will be saving some time at the end for audience questions. But today we are joined by an incredible lineup of design system experts to talk about the current landscape of design tokens in 2024. So Supernova surveyed over 200 designers and developers about how they use design tokens, and the report was published yesterday. So if you haven't seen the report yet, you can scan this QR code and get the direct download. But let's get started with a round of introductions so you know the folks who will be speaking today. So panelists, if you could share a little bit about yourself, including your name, your pronouns, what you're currently up to, and how long you've been working in design systems. If we can start with Donnie and go in alphabetical order, that would be awesome.
All right. Thanks, Jocelyn. So, hi, folks. My name is Donnie D'Amato. I'm founder and chief architect at Design Systems House. That's my company that we're dedicated to the future of design systems. I'm also the moderator of the Slack, Twitter, and Mastodon design system communities. So, if you're on any one of those communities, I'm trying to keep it safe as best as we can, depending on the platform that we're on. And then additionally, you may be familiar with some of my work, such as gridless design or mise en mode, which I released last year during Clarity. And I have an upcoming research study that I'm doing this year all about component metrics and measurement. So that's the general gist for me.
And hello, everyone. I'm Jacob, a product manager over here at Figma, recently working on things such as typography variables, which I'm hoping you are all enjoying right now. In addition to that, I don't like spoons that are too concave. I was voted best hair in high school. And yeah, I'm here to answer any question that you have around variables. And I'll pass it over to Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen McMahon. I am a design system engineer, and I am one of the spec editors for the design token community group working on the format and color specs. And I do a lot of conference talks and currently looking for my next gig. I've worked on a few design systems in the past, namely the O'Reilly Media System, Launch Darkly, and Northwestern Mutual. And you can talk to me about all the wacky costumes I wear, racing bikes, and convincing all the speakers to wear costumes on stage while I present. And I'm gonna fob it over to Jocelyn, I believe.
Hello, we are back to me. Cool. So let's just get started. What surprised you all about the report? I know you all have read it, and I also shared the link, the bit.ly in the chat for folks who weren't quite quick enough to grab the QR code. What surprised you all from the report? Was there any specific stat or trend that surprised you, whether because it was very high or just like unexpected?
I have my notes about some of the comments, some of the stuff that I saw in that. One of the bigger notes or themes that I saw was the lack of engineering involvement in the tokens ecosystem, whether it be from a source of truth standpoint, whether it be from maybe the computation of tokens. So it was very interesting to see the I guess the side go onto the design side. Now, granted, I'm sure that much of the Supernova, I guess, ecosystem is really kind of design focused, probably. So it might be a matter of the audience, with those values. But I thought that was interesting as a metric that came out of there. And I have my hypothesis about why that might be, and I think that just ends up being a matter of not just because of the Supernova audience, but also because designers are into ecosystems that design tokens are supporting, where for engineers, generally speaking, and the vast minority of engineers that are making applications aren't really design focused, and they have their own variables already. So it's kind of like their own language that they're already speaking, and they might not know that it does do a good job supporting the design tokens ecosystem through variables, not just Figma variables, just code variables as a whole. So I think that's where I might suggest why that happened, but I'm interested to know what other people think about it.
Yeah, I think it was something like it was around like 75% of the codes or the source of truth for these were in design tools, that was crazy to me as well. I was very much expecting like kind of a 50-50 split between these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kathleen, I'm curious on your take about this, especially coming from like the engineering side.
I found that to be a very interesting statistic, to say the least. And I found it to be potentially telling in a way, in a couple aspects. It made me wonder a couple things. It made me wonder, well, one, because as an engineer, I'm well aware that Supernova exists. I'm well aware that it's an excellent tool. And I'm a proponent of it. I think it's something that should be used. And it's something that when I first saw it, I would propose it to my team to use. I also wonder, are teams collaborating? Are teams siloed? Is this yet another symptom of tokens, in general being held by design, and not saying like engineers, are being, I can be blunt and say, oh, engineers are being left out of the loop again, or, or we're not talking yet again. But I'm wondering, is there a conversation happening? Is there a conversation happening between teams? Or I'm wondering about the makeup of these design system teams. Is it a small team? Is it a large team? What types of decisions are being made above at the leadership level at these companies, where they're making these decisions of how these teams talk to each other, how these teams interact and collaborate together to make the decisions of how to manage tokens, as a team. That's where my brain went immediately.
So you're thinking of this as like a team composition artifact.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
I went. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was more of like, instead of, I was like, is there a systematic problem of we're not talking to each other, and why? Why aren't we talking to each other? My brain leapt one level up immediately. Like there's something going on. There is a miscommunication happening. And
Yeah, I've
like,
been speaking a lot about the design engineering practice recently. A couple podcasts were released literally just 2 days ago that I was on talking about that practice and how important it is for that handoff to communicate between the intentions of design to the execution of engineers and back. And I think maybe there's something to say about that, that maybe if there was that more communication, that ability for design engineers, UX engineers, design technologists to provide more intention and be embedded in more teams to then, raise the importance of design tokens and just design in general. I see a lot of value in that overall.
I'm a perpetual optimist here. Like I'll watch things like Black Mirror and be like, oh wow, look at this cool technology. How fun is this? So just I want to like paint my bias there. But when I saw this and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if we're seeing more hybrid roles come into the ecosystem where people are playing the role of both designer and engineer more often. Because at least what I've noticed among both myself as well as my friends that I'm hanging out with is I'm seeing like the barrier towards design lowering with the new tools that are available right now. And in addition to that, I'm seeing the barrier to code lowering as well, especially with some of the AI assistants that are out there. You have things like Copilot. It's never been easier than it is today to start coding and to learn how to do this. And so I almost wonder if what we're seeing here is a side effect of people acting more as hybrids, but still using these dedicated tools such as like Supernova for the moderation and management of these tokens because they're kind of tailor-made for that purpose. That is my hope, but again, perpetual optimist coming in here.
It's fascinating you say that because in fact, that was we were talking about on the Office Hours podcast. I was referencing there was an interview that Rid Design did with the design engineer at Vercel, the lead, I think. And he was mentioning that he believes that the design engineer role, was his hot take, was not going to exist in a little while. And I was about to like throw hands. I was like, what do you mean? And his purpose of that was actually what you were saying, was that it's a possibility that really what we do is just going to merge into this one like hybrid role that we both do design and do engineering. And it's an interesting idea. And in fact, when I proposed, posed that to PJ on the thing, he was immediately like, absolutely not. Like there are designers that will design and there are engineers that will engineer, and they will be on their separate sides because, that's how people typically are. They are, they end up being often on one side or the other. It's very rare that you have someone that blurs those lines. But, the blurry lines will help in a lot of these areas, certainly. And we see that here.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for it though. I mean, I think that change is always good, and that's part of the fun thing about this. I mean, like, look, we're working on a token spec 90% of the time. That's the whole point of that, is to be able to easily make changes into your system. And sometimes we have these cultural changes as well. And I'm excited to see how the community changes because of it. That's always kind of a fun side effect. On other things that were really surprising inside of this to me were, I mean, obviously very biased here coming from the Figma side, but the adoption of Figma variables. It's been out for 10 months now. And the fact that I think it was like 74% or something of people were using some sort of Figma variable in some way was just like crazy to see there. It was a huge number that I was completely not expecting. Obviously very excited about that. Shared that with the team internally as well. I was just like, oh my God, look at this. This is amazing. But I'm really curious on Donnie, Kathleen, Jocelyn, on each of your ends as well. What was your perception of that?
I'll say that, like, one of the questions that I had prepared for the panel was like, this stat is surprising to me. And that was kind of why we wanted to include a whole section about Figma variables when creating the survey and the report, is that we knew it came out in the summer. There was a lot of chatter when it first came out and it was announced at Config. And some people were really skeptical on, around social about implementing it. And then seeing that, I think it's 69.8% of respondents for the report say that they're using Figma variables right now. And then another 19.3% plan to use it. So that's like the vast majority of folks. And I think what was even more surprising was 42.5% say that Figma variables is their source of truth for design tokens. That was also surprising, that not only had they implemented it, they're now calling it their source of truth, at least from a largely, the proportion of folks who responded to the survey was mostly designers. So that was really surprising to me, and definitely something that we wanted to dig into because we saw that it had launched. Y'all are continuing to launch things. And I think that does change a little bit, like how folks are using design tokens and how that's gonna shape up for the next couple of years. But really curious, Donnie and Kathleen, from y'all's perspective, what that's looked like.
I mean, admittedly, the first thing that comes to mind in that way is honestly just market share. I mean, Figma is an absolute majority when it comes to the design space these days. And the second part of that is probably context switching, right? I would imagine that if a person working on design tokens could stay in their design tool while working on with these resources, that they'd rather do that than switch context to another tool in order to do design related work, right? So if that stuff is in the tool that I'm already playing in or working in, then I'm probably more likely to use it in that tool than probably go elsewhere, right? So I think it's those two things that are contributing to the percentage there of it being mostly in Figma. And I also would posit that, again, going back to the original conversation of the engineering, I think if there was more engineering involvement, it's possible to tip the scales even further. That goes into a source of truth that's more code-based and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's an artifact that's there as well.
And hopping on to Donnie's point, if people are going to be using Figma variables, and if Figma variables are connecting to, like, if they're basing like what their source of truth is to be compatible with like the design token spec, right? And if the design token spec is going to be compatible with, like, for example, a JSON object or, some other source of truth, if, engineers are going to be, hosting their source of truth in a repo, for example, in a JSON object, or, somewhere in one single source of truth, making something that is simple for designers, I don't like the term simple, straightforward for designers to manage a place to grab those tokens to pull them right into Figma variables in a way that is straightforward to manage and grab and update and version, and to just reduce the time to keep your updates in sync into just this one place. I just see a net gain for the entire community to stay in sync going forward. Words are hard with my lungs. I'm going to say right now, I have bronchitis right now, so I'm just trying not to cough right now. But there's a net gain for having like Figma variables adoption right now, going to increase market share. Figma variables adopting the design token spec that is evolving, that will be supporting things like JSON object support, and being able to get this single source of truth that can talk to each other and be more efficient and allow everyone to stay in sync with a single source of truth and just create these efficiencies to work more seamlessly together.
We're so jazzed about the design token spec that all y'all are working on right now. We see it on the Figma side as being one of the most important things is how do you connect your design to code? Because if you can't do that, like what's the point of doing the design to begin with? And so many of the things that we're working on right now are, well, how do we express this on the code side? How do we create that connection there? And without a doubt, like the W3C spec for this, I mean, it feels like the first time that we've really had something that feels like a proper interop format. I mean, we've had a bunch of attempts at formats in the past, but this feels like a really big collaboration between everyone of just like, okay, we've got a sense of kind of what we need now on the token side. Let's really codify this. And I'm just excited for all tools to really embrace that, because then there will just be this commonality of language where it's just like, oh no, you're talking about tokens? Cool. We can understand tokens. We know what format it's in. We're ready to go. We have a common agreement of what these can do and what they can't do. That part is something we're super bought in on as well. But yeah, I think it's just one of the things that I really find interesting here with it is so much of the pattern of code is getting pulled into design right now in such a good way, where previously, we had all these just like really siloed elements of design. But one thing that I'm seeing more and more of now is design is starting to grow more and more in complexity. And what we were figuring out is that the way to deal with this complexity has already been solved by a lot of these engineers and these people on the code side. Things like version control, things like sharing interop formats, things like, even doing like merges and pull requests. Like these are things that we're slowly adopting on the design side and aligning more and more with this. So I'm really excited for that future where these things are even closer together and we really have something that's harmonious between the two engineering disciplines.
Yeah, I think speaking of like standardization and just having the spec and things that everyone can refer back to, I know naming tokens is just a big question that comes up. I'm sure, Donnie, you've seen it a lot in the design system communities that you are moderating, where people are always asking, how do I name this? How do I name that? And so one of the things that we were curious about for the survey is that something that has been standardized? Are we seeing folks leaning towards a specific route towards naming? Because there are a lot of different articles and suggestions about how you could go about it. And a lot of larger design systems have also shared how they are naming. And so that was one of the questions that we had. And so what we saw was that about like 48% of respondents don't use anybody's standards and created their own from scratch. Although the standard from Style Dictionary is used by about like 33% of people, which was interesting because it wasn't 33% of people who actually use Style Dictionary. So there were folks using that naming convention without using Style Dictionary. And then people also, understandably, prioritized ease of understanding when naming tokens. So I'm curious what y'all think about naming standardization. Do you think there needs to be or should be standardization in terms of how folks are naming design tokens, so it is a little bit easier to go from one design system to another and know what tokens you're referencing? Or do you think that's not necessary? We don't think that'll happen.
Goodness, I could talk about this for like 2 hours. Oh my goodness gracious. I mean, the thing that I see out of that is really like a couple of things. First, I mean, the respondents that say that they made up their own, I'm under the impression that potentially they actually could be using one that existed, not knowing that it existed, right? They could have done their research and whatnot and seen a couple of things, or they could have just, of course, made it up their own. Because I think we are sort of gravitating to a similar kind of structure. It's not the same. There's definitely opinions that are out there, but there's gravitating to a similar structure. I think the largest respondent or number of respondents, the token structure that was suggested there is actually highly segmented, meaning it has many, many parts. And I think that's a result of people not knowing what they need and wanting to have spots for everything in the case that they might want to inject something for scalability purposes, right? So for example, I might need something that is specifically a component token for a toggle. That toggle has a hover state that also has a chosen state or like a selected state. And maybe it needs to be branded for some reason. So there's lots of different segments to the token to prepare for the possibility of customization. And I think that's a little bit of the thing that people aren't totally comfortable with yet. It's still on track for being more comfortable about it. In fact, you know, another one of the metrics that we saw in the survey was more people adopting modes, which is really great. Like that's the real power behind the tokens, right? But there's still a lot of folks that are potentially not adopting modes because they don't aren't prepared for their experiences to change with the flip of the switch, right? That we have been in a long time just, you know, creating an experience for that one experience, and only until recently, relatively, have we been considering new modes and new ways of changing things. So with those possibilities of changing things, it looks like we want to have the ability to be very specific about what's changing. And I think that's where the segments are coming in and these longer token names happening. I have my own hot takes about that stuff that I'm going to pause on, and I'm sure there'll be blog posts about it later on, but interested to hear the other opinions.
Yeah, I think naming is such a hard thing, and getting alignment on naming especially is, I just don't see that being standardized. Yes, look at this. Housemate delivery of freshly made eggs on toast. How amazing is that? Thank you, Michael. Um, Naming is such a hard thing in that I don't think that we're actually going to see standardization here. I would love to see standardization. Don't get me wrong, because like the opportunities that would provide are amazing. But you need different names depending on your requirements. And oftentimes you're going to have companies that have a requirement for component scope tokens, which is going to absolutely blow up your spec. And when you have that, I don't think you're going to have a system where you're also going to have this like aligned semantic layer where you have like, okay, half of it is aligned with the spec, but then another half isn't. Then you have this kind of extension thing going on. There's just a kind of weird situation with that. And I think that's why we see a lot of these custom implementations. They arise out of different requirements that companies have. Now, what I can hope for is that at the very least, we have a standardized pattern of naming, which I think that's really what Style Dictionary was showing, is that there's this adoption of a pattern so that there is this at least shared understanding of how the names work, and that you can expect a name to exist within an actual system. That part, I think, is the most important thing, that designers and developers can expect that a certain token exists just based off of their understanding of the pattern of the system. Kathleen, Kirsten, your takes here.
Okay, mine is a blending of the two here. So I think the modes are there's going to be a rise in the modes. Ease of understanding is huge here because a lot of people, they try to follow Style Dictionary's, you know, the CTI, that component token intent model. However, if your team doesn't understand your naming convention, they're not going to use your tokens. So the meat of, like, the whole gist of this is, as a team, you have to agree on your naming convention that works for your team. And that is why there will not be a standardization. Unfortunately, there's not going to be like the global design system of tokens, like naming convention out there. There is going to be some sort of customization per, design tokens per, design tokens per design system. Like per every single system, there will always be some sort of customization that works for your company, because there's always some sort of nomenclature that is custom for your company, for that one little nuance, for that one little snowflake component or one snowflake app that you have that no one else knows about until they join your company, that they understand that nuance, that you have to have that special name. And once you have made that particular naming system, for this, semantic layer, once you've established that, you have gotten alignment amongst your team. And because you've come to an agreement on this naming system, it's weird, but it just creates this sense of unity of, okay, we have this naming system, therefore we have a successful system, and then we can grow, our tokens without making ridiculous amount of tokens, but we can have this like nice set of tokens that works for us and scale from there smartly.
Yeah, adoption is huge for design systems.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
that's the way that
yes.
that's the way we survive. If
Right.
we aren't adopted, then it's over, right?
Right.
So we are always trying to cater to our users, our customers, our
Right.
peers when we're making stuff. And the easiest way to do that is to get agreement across those
Your team.
users to get the adoption. However, I do still believe that there is a world where we could paradigm shift. I mean, admittedly, we've done that through modes, right? The ability to allow for a light and dark theme is only possible through design tokens. And before the design tokens, there's, of course, there was a lot of conflict about the possibility of my UI changing to be dark because I designed it to be light, but we did a paradigm shift. I mean, responsive design, paradigm shift, right? There have been shifts in there to all suggest a one direction to go in certain ways. Is that possible for design token and naming and that kind of ecosystem? I think maybe. I just don't think that we've actually landed on it yet.
I think there's an ego block there as well, a little bit. And I'm going to call all of us out in that I find that when people approach that, hey, I need to create a new design system, one of the first things that a lot of design system kind of engineers or designers think is, well, I need to define a token spec. And I'm going to define like the best token spec that's super readable and super understandable. And I find that it's very interesting that one of the top responses of reasons why they use a custom spec or the thing that they prioritize is that they really want like a readable and understandable token spec. What I found is that every token spec still needs to be taught and people still need to understand it before they can use it. Very few that I've seen and that are out there are readable or understandable out of the box, unless you ask the creator of that design system, in which case they'll be like, oh no, mine's perfectly understandable. You can use it right out of the box. And look, I'm guilty of this as well. But I've seen the vast majority of these creators do this. And it's not a bad thing by any means. I think it's really good that we're having such a wide variety of these. But I do worry that if we're looking towards that convergence that I think you're mentioning, Donnie, in the future around maybe that there will be a paradigm shift here. I do worry if that we do really have to leave our egos at the door and be like, look, let's be willing to try something that is a community definition rather than, no, we're going to create our own thing and roll our own way for our own purposes.
Agree.
Okay, I'm going to point something out that was just said in the comments. I'm gonna give props to Peter Allen. He said, there's a lot of cultural distrust of dev within design. We need to get past that and drive that collaboration. Okay. So, well, one, well, we're talking about cultures and design as cultures is another, which is true. And I'm gonna get to that in a minute, because one, I'm both. But there, this has to do with what we're talking about here is, the three of us were talking about here is, in order to get to the modes, you have to get to the agreement first. You have to get to the agreement about the shared naming before you can say, let's propose the light and the dark mode. Because you just can't say, oh, I know best. That's the ego. You know? And that's also when you hear handoff, when you hear designer handoff, as a dev, that's insulting. And I'm going to say that to the designers in the chat right now. And I'm looking at the chat right now with a stink eye.
Get him, Kathleen. Get him. Get him.
Because nothing is worse than, here's your design. Go forth. Because it's like, how about handshake, like adequately. What you said, it's like work together rather than just like, here, I'm done with you. It's like, no, let's work together. Let's not distrust each other. Let's work together. Let's trust that we know how to work together. Maybe we actually do think alike.
Imagine that.
So like these like annotations, like annotating things, it's already saying, I don't trust you. I don't trust that you know what you're doing. Okay.
Look at the baby.
Sorry.
Look at the baby. Sorry. Stop the panel.
Spicy
Oh my
moments.
goodness.
Let puppy.
It's okay. We can just let joy win. It's
Joy.
fine. Just pet
I
a
can see how
dog.
you're perpetually an optimist with the dog like that in the room.
Yeah.
I know, my cat's sleeping in
Life's
the back
gonna be
right now.
okay.
Yes.
But no, Kathleen, I think
There
you
are no
really
animals
touch
here.
upon a really important point there, which is
Yeah.
you really have to make that handoff a collaboration.
Yes.
Like I was a prototyper for 7 years and
Yeah.
building designs day in, day out effectively. And the
Yeah.
whole point of that role was to collaborate with designer for a handoff of something to prove that
Yeah.
design would actually work in the wild.
Yeah.
And we miss that step so many times when we're actually
Yeah.
doing this handoff, that collaboration step between the two, because it's like the whole no plan survives contact with the enemy or something like that. Like
Yeah.
no design is going to survive contact with the users. Like people will find something to break. It will happen every single time. Like has anybody ever shipped a product that was just like, oh, it was perfect round one? I think if you are, then I feel like, again, going back to that ego thing where it's just like, oh, this is perfect. We have to leave that at the door and realize that it is an iteration. It's a collaboration. We have to iterate on these things. We have to build upon them. And that's always been true. So yeah, big plus one to that.
It's like,
Yeah, well
y'all
said.
realize that some of us developers used to be designers or are still designers. We are. So, and it's not saying designers, and like someone just said, designers are too sensitive. That's whoever said that, that's me. They're being mean. That's not appropriate. No. Don't be mean. Don't be mean in the comments, y'all. Be nice.
Do be nice.
Maybe be spicy.
all
You could
sensitive.
be spicy, right?
Spicy, but not
okay.
mean.
Yeah, we're all
Spicy's
sensitive.
okay. Yeah.
We're
Hey,
all sensitive.
d-
Yeah. Anyway.
If the panel doesn't mind, I would actually like to ask a question of the chat, because
Yeah.
I saw something very interesting in the results, and I want to kind of know. Well, here's the question. The survey was asking, what are we tokenizing? And toward the end of that graph, I saw opacity, visibility, and z-index. And I'd really like to know what the purpose of those are for people's ecosystems, right? Clearly, of course, color, topography, spacing, yes, I could see that, providing those brand expressions, absolutely. But those properties, in my opinion, affect layout. And granted, we have abilities to, potentially theme layout. It's much more tricky. So I'm wondering if this is a direction for folks to potentially try manipulating layout through theming and modes, or is there something else that's going on? So in the chat, let us know.
Donnie, that's a great question. I'm really curious now about Z-index.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, never even considered that as a token.
Yeah, at place I'm working right now, I actually have been going through an effort removing Z-index from everything, because it really is like a nuclear, decision to be like, oh, I'm more important than everybody else. Here's my big number. Boom, I'm on top, right? And then somebody else finds out, oh, wait, no, but I'm more important and puts it on top. And there's a better approach of layering things in a UI than trying to force it through Z-index. And I think that's an artifact of what we used to do with Photoshop, of moving layers and things like that. And that's not really how the web is meant to operate. And in fact, it's moving toward a place where you don't even have the opportunity to layer things with Z-index with the top layer spec, right? Because when things get onto the top layer, things appear on top of each other by order, not by Z-index. So you have no control over, what appears on top of what in the top layer, only by how it gets added to that top layer. So that's the way that what I believe we should have been building things. But I'm very interested to know what people are doing with these properties.
It says, Kirill says opacity, tokens for overlays, as well as some states for graph atoms, default hover. Graph atoms like a bar or bubble, on default it's 80%, and on hover it's 100%. And then Peter Allen added, in design, Z-index is generally seen more as an idea of design architecture rather than functional value. And then I think Mike is wondering, when working with a large team of devs, if a Z-index system would be helpful.
No, get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's only going to be a problem. It's only going to be a problem every single time. Really, if you look at what top layer is doing as a specification as an engineer, you should adhere to what top layer is trying to do. And when I say top layer, that's, again, it's a specification in the browser right now about being able to put dialogues and popovers and things of that nature on a separate layer that appears on top of everything else. And like I mentioned, it is based off of the order in which it is applied to the layer, right? So that order dictates what's on top first. And if you want to have something else appear, on top of all that, you add that to the layer. And that makes sense, I think, from an experiential standpoint, because the newest thing should be the thing on top, right? Just fundamentally speaking. And once that thing is no longer relevant, it should be removed. And then the next thing that we were just looking at should be the most important thing, and so on and so forth. So that mental model, I think, makes a lot of sense. But again, folks are more familiar with the Z-indexing and being in control of this stuff. And I think that's where that fight comes in. So yes, the TLDR is get rid of your Z-indexing.
They've said they use the index because they've never heard of top layer, and they're going to change everything this afternoon.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
A question related to top layer. How do notifications and toasts work with it, if we're going to jump into the top layer conversation?
No, I mean, I don't want to go too far off the rails here, but there's technically, according to the HTML spec that I read, there's only 3 things right now that go on the top layer. It's the dialogue in a particular configuration, popovers, and I think the backdrop, or something else. Kathleen?
Yes, the popover, which has the backdrop and the dialogue. Now the popover, which I just did a talk on this, and I'm jumping around, so I'm jumping around because I'm ridiculously excited about this. The popover attribute, which has just gone stable in all modern browsers as of April 16th.
It was 2 days ago.
Update Firefox.
2 days
Update
ago.
Firefox. Yes. So this is an attribute. So you can actually do, of course, the page is unresponsive. So you can add the popover attribute and make disclosure widgets and stuff like that. Anyway, you can make things natively pop, like bye Z-index, hell. You can just pop things to the top layer, which is the hashtag top layer, Una Kravitz has been doing some magical stuff that you can do with CSS to pop things up on the top layer of like the browser window and just do magic words. I'm so excited. My words have escaped me right now. But now the popover attribute is native in the browser. So you can do things with native popovers, tooltips, and all these other things. Now, without the design system engineers are very excited. Right? Yes, see me? See, my words are gone right now. But that's why I'm just popping in all these. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I popped in a W3 Schools link. I'm so embarrassed.
Oh no.
Ignore that one.
You removed we're gonna have to take your design engineer cards. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Take that. No wonder why my page went unresponsive.
Immediately revoked.
Yeah.
I am revoked. I'm revoked. I thought I did. Hold on.
Oh wait, we got cat camera though.
I
So
see
no,
kitties.
yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Okay.
The cat saved you. It's okay.
Yep.
You can have your card back.
Okay. All right. I'll give you the real. Ignore the W3 Schools. Hold on.
And we'll also collate all the resources that have been mentioned in the talk and also shared in the chat with the recording so that
ignore
folks.
the
I'll ignore
W3
that
Schools.
one. That one we
That
won't
was
include.
bad.
The other
Bad
ones.
link.
We will include the others.
But popover attribute is stable in all the browsers. In MDN, you can see about the popover attribute, which is stable as of 2 days ago. There are ways that you can style things with your popover tooltip where it will actually move for you. So you can make it just like move in the browser for you. So you don't have to like worry about it positioning. It's beautiful.
Yeah, the anchor positioning API that's coming around with CSS also is going to be amazing. I mean, I've been following it very closely for a while now because the initial kind of approach of it was very verbose, and now there's some nice keywords that allow for flipping to happen automatically, which is really nice to anchors. So some really exciting stuff coming on in there. But again, I want to bring it back to the token situation. So I'm really one of the things that we were experimenting maybe like last year with is the ability to potentially theme layout. So maybe like a sign-in page for one particular brand wants to have an image on the left and the sign-in options on the right, but another brand maybe wants to stack it, right? So is that something that's feasible in terms of a themability kind of thing? And that's what I'm thinking that things like visibility and potentially Z indexing are kind of dovetailing in. I imagine the Z indexing is probably more like base token related to just kind of layer like modals and things like that. But definitely just to see, if there's folks that are doing more involved stuff than just brand expressions through these tokens.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Donnie, to your point, doing these kind of layout-based token transitions. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and you can do a lot of really creative things. And it's also something that's probably necessary when you start doing a bunch of multi-brand type elements as well, where you really want to express things in a rich way between these different brands. I do think Z-index feels like a kind of separate thing where, to your point, people are trying to codify this primitive aspect rather than a semantic aspect. And they're using it more just like, oh, well, this is something that we use, so we need to have a token for this. I would really encourage you, like, if the only reason why you're creating a token is just to have a system for something, but the system isn't actually creating effect or usage within the system, I would really try and stay away from that. Because one of the dangers that I find is you overload your token system too much. And then you have just too many of these things to pick from for both your designers and your developers, where oh, I can't expect what a certain token is going to be because the token spec that I have is so large, I have no idea what the system is, because it's actually a combination of multiple different naming patterns because of the special tokens that you have inside of it. And that's always a big risk that I find. But the layout, I'm super curious to see how people are using that and how they're actually expressing these things.
Yeah, the number of tokens is huge, right? The more tokens you have, the more you have to be responsible for, and then the harder it is for your peers to choose the right one. Right, that takes law. That's basic UX, fundamental practice. There is that the less amount of choices that the user has, the easier it is for them to make the choice. So the more that you introduce, the more that you're going to have difficulty, sharing these things out and maintaining them.
We have exactly 10 minutes left now, and we have a couple of questions from the audience. So I'm going to read them in order, but feel free, y'all, to go in the Q&A and vote or add other questions. So the first one from David: I'm the principal software engineer for Royal Caribbean Group and building a design system. What do you see as the future of the single source of truth for a design system for Figma to mono repo engineering stuff? Also, what design to code automation trends do you see, and can this deliver good enough quality code to speed up the process?
I'm happy to like chip in on my end. I think it's really hard to say what your single source of truth is for owning the authorship and the changes of the system itself. Like that is always going to change based off the processes that you have internally to your company. But I 100% see the single like source of truth of the interop format being that W3C spec that Kathleen and team are actually really like driving on right now. If that is something that you are not kind of aligned on right now, I'd highly encourage you to just participate in that discussion, because it's still in the process of being created. And like the main thing that I really want is for it to achieve success, it's to be able to actually represent all the needs of everyone in the community. And the more people that we can get involved, talking through that and being on board and discussing that, I think the better future we're going to actually end up in.
We're talking about the future of connection, I guess, between design development. I mean, admittedly, like for me personally, I believe the source of truth is code, because that's what the user actually sees, right? The user actually sees code. They're going to be interacting with code. So I always believe that the source of truth should be code. Now, what is important, of course, is the decision makers to know what value any one of those tokens should be are designers. So you need a uh, a way for designers to influence, again, what I believe the source of truth to be into code. And that's why I think it ends up shifting into a tool like Figma potentially, or other design tools, because the designers need to change up those values. But it makes it easier for them, for all of it to be in there, and for then engineers to just pull from that, right? But again, in fact, I think that source really should just be in the code, and then being infected by the designers and their curation. The way that we've been handling it at GoDaddy in particular is that, unfortunately, there is no visual element to the way that the design tokens are curated. It is purely just them in a JSON file, and it's terrible, absolutely terrible. There really needs to be a UI element that defines, when I make a change in a token file, what that is going to affect visually in my UI. That is fundamentally what we're trying to do, is define what UI changes in this token file. So we've made some strides in order to make it more visual, certainly, but visual products like Figma, Token Studio, things that can show the effects of your change, are absolutely more powerful in that way. So that's why I think we get the disconnect in the source of truth scenario. And there's still a lot more areas of opportunity for the cross collaboration that Kathleen's been mentioning, of course, to break down the silos and get more, I guess, enhancements to the design and development collaboration, right? So, I think about the way that a design system is a set of rules and can be applied to a wireframe to then show a high fidelity version of something without the designer pushing pixels around. I think that's really powerful as an example of the future of what we're doing. So just as one thought.
Kathleen, was there anything you wanted to add to this one?
So for this one, I'm with Donnie about this. Single source of truth should be code. So you should be pulling in code as your source of truth and bringing that source of truth into whatever tool you need, to, sync up that source to your designs, wherever you need it, whether it be Supernova, whether it be, Figma, wherever you need to pull in that data. And also in that source of truth, you should be handling things like comments and notes for, handling deprecations, any type of management for versioning, so you can, manage like which tokens are current, which tokens need to be, swapped out at certain points, and, handling your deprecation strategies, so you can inform your teams of, which things need to be current, which tokens need to be phased out, so you can keep your tokens up to date. And you can do, when you have your tokens in code in a single source of truth, you can use tools. You can create tools to automate, ways to automate how to, how to have like linters, or other ways to automate methods to inform either your designers or developers, like, hey, like this token's old and we will be phasing it out in 6 months or whatever, so like change this token to this new token, or remove these sets because we've decided we don't use this token anymore, we've leaned these things down, and we've changed this to a new set of tokens. And so that's why it's important to have like everything code based, that way you can like just have this one single source of truth, flow everything down from the single source of truth, have all that data in one place, and filter it down towards all your separate outputs like web, mobile, Figma, and so forth.
We have a lot more control in code at
Yes.
the end of the day,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like we, no offense to Figma, but we do have to wait for Figma features in order to get Figma, functionality, right?
Yes.
But when it occurs in code, it's basically whatever comes to your mind. If you have an engineer that can do it right now, you could have whatever you want done tomorrow, right? And there's something powerful about that, of course.
Talk together, like, yeah, you could talk together and partner on how you want to get everything done.
I think there's a lot of conversation right now about component spec tokens. And one of the questions in the Q&A is from Jeremy, is thinking about number of tokens. Would it be better to have more semantic tokens or more component tokens? The semantic layer isn't as descriptive for components, different users too, component authors versus more general consumption.
I could also talk about this for like 2 hours, but go ahead, Jake.
Yes. I'm a fan of not using component tokens, honestly, unless your components are really switching like visually in a really strong way between different brands that you have, and like, I mean, strong compositional changes, like Donnie, what you were talking about earlier, then I would really avoid these component scope tokens, because what I find is they are okay for implementing when you are actually coding these things up. But the downside to them is they 10x your token spec like immediately. And then you're creating these tokens which will never be reused again. Like you're never going to reuse button background on any other component in any other area inside of your system. And creating these redundant tokens, it feels like a bad usage of what tokens should be. The only time that I really recommend these are when you do truly have that multi-brand system that absolutely requires them. So I would really ask yourself, like, do you need that component layer? And if not, then yeah, align on that semantic layer, add in a few more in there, that's fine. But at least those ones will get reuse. And that, I think, is the more important thing. Don, I know that you have hot takes here too.
Goodness gracious, do I have hot takes? I mean, here's the situation for me is that the component tokens are a litmus test to how many snowflakes you have in your system, right? That's really what it is. You're basically trying to support snowflakes as soon as you start introducing component tokens, in my opinion. If you are attempting to, have and this is very much aligned to like the marketing pages we see, right? The marketing pages need to have different expressions on them, and therefore needs to have different tokens that are much more specific. And in fact, this is the talk I had at Clarity. There is a way to have those expressions be hyper-localized to those parts of the pages and provide those kinds of expressions with the exact same semantic tokens that you probably already have. So I recommend that you look at the website called mode.place. That was the content from my talk of clarity, which it's called mise en mode. Sorry, my French folks out there. And it's talking about how you would scope themes to your page to provide different brand expressions in ways that you would otherwise consider component tokens or other ways of slicing up your page. And that, again, like I said, reduces the amount of tokens that you are curating, and then just adds additional modes, in Figma's parlance, to certain sections to give those different expressions that you're looking for in subsections of that page. So no component tokens. Get rid of them. Just delete them. You don't need them.
Agreed.
That definitely seemed like a controversial take, and some people have opinions about this one, and
Right.
I love that.
Disagree. I think the component tokens have a need, and they are private to the components.
Kathleen and I are going to go outside. It's going to be all right. It's going to be fine.
They should be private to the components. You know, they should be scoped to the components and just private to the components.
Yeah. And I think there are ways to do this correctly, Kathleen, to your point, where you do isolate their scope really heavily here.
Just to their components, period.
Yeah.
They don't get scoped anywhere else. You're scoped right to the components.
Yep. There's a part of me that wished that, like, shadow root adoption was higher here, because I really find that approach pretty elegant here of being like, okay, let's define these in the shadow root. They're only accessible inside of here. We can use them to map into this. Life is great. But then I see everywhere else that they end up getting used, and that, it goes far beyond that, not just in code, but in other places. And then it just hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, I
The dream
see
of
the
them is
semantic
good.
layer as I think of it a little bit as a deep understanding of the experience and trying to identify the purpose of all the things that are there. And in my opinion, there's only a few actual purposes of things being in your experience, right? I want to click this thing. I want to put input text into this thing, or provide feedback to the user, right? Very I guess, localized purposes to things that end up in experience. And then the tokens are just kind of trying to describe the properties of those functions, those purposes, and provide, again, brand expression to them. So when it comes to those snowflakes that end up coming around, it's like, well, is this toggle really so much different from this button, fundamentally speaking? Right? From the functionality of it. Why are you choosing the toggle over the button? Is it really a separate functionality that you're trying to convey here? If so, then absolutely, right? Then you go ahead and you slice that up. But it's entirely possible that the button is a button is a button, and therefore should also convey buttonness to all of your users in the same way, so that they are not confused about a new pattern that gets introduced.
I do know that we are over time now, but if you all want to continue discussing, please feel free. We still have lots of people with us, but I did want to flag that. So if any of y'all have hard stops, we don't keep you from your next meeting or call.
I unfortunately do have to drop here, but thank you all so much. This was an absolute delight talking through all this. And the results were so interesting to dive into. Big shout out to Supernova here for really compiling all of those.
Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciated your insights. And all of y'all should participate in the W3 Specs conversation and check that out. We'll definitely include more information about that too in the follow-up, so folks can take a look and participate.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Lovely.
Well, have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.